Welcome to the Revenge Diary.
People always say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. No one tells you it might also be the day your entire career gets sabotaged by someone who sees you as nothing more than a threat to their inheritance. My name is Margaret. I am 30-year-old, and this is the story of how the worst betrayal of my professional life happened while I was zipping up my wedding dress, and how it led to the sweetest revenge I never saw coming. Before we dive into the story, I have a quick favor to ask. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We drop new videos every single day. Now, let's get back to the story. It was May 18th, 2024. A Saturday that started like a dream and nearly ended like a nightmare. But let me back up, because you need to understand how we got here. 6 years. That's how long I'd been grinding at Glenhurst Development Corporation in San Francisco. I started as a junior analyst fresh out of UC Berkeley, making barely enough to split a studio apartment in Oakland with 2 roommates. But I had something that most people in corporate America seem to have forgotten. I actually cared about doing good work. While my colleagues were networking at happy hours, I was staying late, learning every detail of zoning laws and environmental compliance. While they were taking long lunches, I was building relationships with city planners and community leaders. It wasn't glamorous, but it was effective. By 2022, at 27, I was the youngest senior project manager in the company's 40-year history. Robert Glenhurst himself, the CEO and founder, had started calling me the backbone of our Western division. High praise from a man who'd built his company from a single strip mall renovation into a $100 million empire. But success in corporate America comes with a target on your back, especially when you're a woman who's climbing faster than the boss's son thinks you should. Trent Glenhurst, 29 years old, Harvard MBA, trust fund baby who'd never worked a real day in his life. Technically, he held the title of Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. In reality, he spent most of his time playing golf at the Presidio and making inappropriate comments to the younger female staff. The tension between us had been building for months, but it reached a breaking point in March 2024 during our quarterly stakeholders meeting in Denver. There I was in a room full of investors, city officials, and senior executives when Robert stands up and says, "Margaret's going to walk you through our Q1 performance and outline our strategy for the Sacramento project." Not Trent. Me, I remember looking across the conference table and seeing Trent's face turn the color of a ripe tomato. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought he might crack a tooth. When he tried to interrupt my presentation with some half-baked suggestion about luxury condos, his father actually held up a hand and said, "Let Margaret finish." That moment, that public dismissal, was when I knew Trent Glenhurst had decided I was his enemy. The Sacramento project was everything. A $48 million redevelopment deal that would transform an abandoned industrial site into mixed-use housing for working families. It was exactly the kind of work that made me proud to wake up every morning, but it was also a political minefield, environmental compliance issues, historic designation concerns, neighborhood opposition from longtime residents worried about gentrification. Every stakeholder had to be managed carefully, every regulatory requirement met to the letter. I'd spent 8 months building consensus, attending community meetings on weeknight evenings, sitting through endless city council sessions, working with environmental consultants to ensure we met every EPA guideline. By April 2024, just weeks before my wedding, everything was finally falling into place. The city council was on board. The community groups had endorsed the plan. We were maybe 60 days away from breaking ground. That's when Trent decided to help. He called me into his corner office, the one with the view of San Francisco Bay that he definitely hadn't earned, and laid out his supposed vision for the project. "Margaret," he said, leaning back in his Herman Miller chair like he was doing me a favor, "I've been thinking about the Sacramento site. What if we carved out a section for luxury condos? High-end units, maybe 1,500 square feet each. We could call it the Glenhurst Collection or something." I stared at him. "Trent, that would kill the entire deal. The community support is based on affordable housing. The city council approved mixed use, not luxury development. He waved his hand dismissively. That's old thinking, Margaret. This is what the Glenhurst brand needs, something aspirational. Something that shows we're not just building for the masses. The masses? I couldn't hide my disgust. These are working families, teachers, firefighters, nurses, people who have been priced out of San Francisco and are looking for somewhere they can actually afford to live. His smile was cold. Well, maybe it's time you remembered who signs your paychecks. That should have been my warning. But I was too focused on protecting the project, and too naive to realize just how far Trent would go to prove his point. May 18th, 2024, dawned clear and beautiful at the Edgewood Tahoe Resort in Nevada. I'd chosen the venue partly for its stunning views of Lake Tahoe, but mostly because it was far enough from San Francisco that I could forget about work for 3 days. Connor and I had driven up on Thursday with both sets of parents. My soon-to-be husband, 6'2", quietly confident former Marine who now taught high school history, had spent months telling me this weekend was about us, not deadlines or development deals. You've earned this, he'd said during our rehearsal dinner, raising his glass of champagne. We've earned this. I was up at 5 a.m. that Saturday, too excited and anxious to sleep. My bridesmaids, college friends who'd watched me work myself to exhaustion for years, had decorated the bridal suite with photos of Connor and me, little inside jokes, reminders of why we'd fallen in love. Jade, my maid of honor, was helping me with my dress, a simple but elegant A-line with delicate lace sleeves that my mother had found at a boutique in Sausalito. In the mirror, I looked like myself, but better. Happier. Ready for the next chapter. You look absolutely radiant, said my mom, adjusting my grandmother's pearl necklace around my neck. For the first time in months, I felt completely present. No mental checklists. No worry about permit deadlines or contractor schedules. Just pure, uncomplicated joy. That lasted exactly until 11:47 a.m. My phone was sitting on the vanity, plugged in and mostly ignored, when it buzzed with a text message. Jade picked it up. It's from someone with the initials TG. My stomach dropped. Trent Glenhurst. I almost told her to ignore it. Almost. But something, call it professional paranoia, made me take the phone and read the message. You're fired. Consider it my gift to you. TG, the words hit me like a physical blow. I literally staggered backward, nearly tripping over the train of my dress. What is it? Jade asked, immediately concerned. I showed her the screen, my hands shaking. She read it once, twice, then looked at me with pure fury in her eyes. Are you kidding me? Today, on your wedding day? My bridesmaids gathered around, each of them reading the message and expressing various levels of outrage. But all I could think about was the Sacramento project. 8 months of work. $48 million. Hundreds of families counting on affordable housing. What had Trent done? I wanted to call Robert immediately. I wanted to drive back to San Francisco and storm into the office. I wanted to do anything except what I was supposed to be doing in 20 minutes, walking down the aisle. That's when Connor appeared in the doorway. Hey, you're not supposed to see, Jade started. It's okay, I interrupted. I held up the phone and showed him the message. Connor read it. His jaw tightened, the only sign that he was as angry as I was. Then he looked at me with those steady gray eyes that had gotten me through every crisis of the past 3 years. So, he said quietly, do you want to postpone the wedding and drive back to deal with this? Because if you do, I'll support you. We'll figure it out. I stared at him. Here was a man who'd been planning this day for 18 months, whose family had flown in from Michigan, who'd taken leave from his teaching job, and he was genuinely ready to postpone our wedding because some spoiled rich kid had decided to ruin my career. No, I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. We're getting married. Trent Glenhurst has taken enough from me. He's not taking this. Connor smiled, that slow, proud smile that had made me fall in love with him at a coffee shop in the Mission District 3 years earlier. That's my girl, he said. Let's go get married. The ceremony was everything we'd dreamed it would be. The terrace overlooking Lake Tahoe was perfect, mountain peaks reflecting in the crystal-clear water, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine trees. 75 of our closest friends and family gathered to witness something beautiful. My father walked me down the aisle to At Last by Etta James. Connor was waiting at the altar in his navy suit, his eyes never leaving mine. When I reached him, he mouthed, "You're beautiful," and for a moment, nothing else existed. Our vows were personal, but not too intimate. We'd saved the really private stuff for each other the night before. But when Connor promised to support my dreams even when they scare me, I felt tears starting. When I promised to choose us, even when the world tries to pull us apart, I saw him blink hard. We kissed. Everyone cheered. Jade cried during her toast, talking about how Connor had brought out Margaret's softer side without dimming her fire. My father danced with me to Born to Run. Springsteen had been our soundtrack growing up in New Jersey. For 4 hours, I was just a bride. Not a project manager, not an employee, not someone whose career had just been sabotaged. Just a woman celebrating the best decision she'd ever made. It was around 4:00 p.m. when I finally checked my phone again. 98 missed calls. I'm not exaggerating. 98. Some were from coworkers, a few from my assistant, Gina, several from numbers I didn't recognize. But the most recent ones, the ones that made my blood run cold, were from Robert Glenhurst himself. I showed Connor the screen. We were sitting at the head table, our wedding cake half-eaten in front of us, watching our guests dance to Sweet Caroline. "That's a lot of calls," he said with characteristic understatement. "Something's really wrong," I said. "Robert doesn't call people on weekends, let alone call multiple times." I found a quiet corner of the resort lobby and called him back. He answered on the first ring. "Margaret," his voice was strained, almost desperate. "Please tell me this is all some kind of misunderstanding. What exactly are you referring to, Robert?" "The Sacramento contract. The preliminary agreement with Winslow Development. Your signature authorizing the luxury condo amendment." My blood ran cold. "What luxury condo amendment?" "The one that completely undermines our agreement with the city council. The one that's going to kill the entire project unless we can explain it." "Robert, I don't know what you're talking about. I never signed any amendment. I never authorized any changes to the Sacramento project. And I certainly never worked with Winslow Development." Dead silence. Then I heard him shout, really shout at someone in the background. "Get Trent in here, now!" Connor and I cut our honeymoon short. While our guests were probably still recovering from the reception, we were on a red-eye flight back to San Francisco. I spent the entire flight trying to piece together what had happened. Trent hadn't just fired me. He'd apparently tried to steal my project and reroute it under his own name. But the details were still fuzzy, and I needed to see the paperwork. Monday morning, 8:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Glenhurst Development offices in Soma. I was wearing my best power suit, navy Armani that I'd splurged on after my last promotion, and carrying a leather briefcase full of every document related to the Sacramento project. The office was buzzing with nervous energy. People kept glancing at me, then looking away quickly. Gina, my assistant, nearly cried when she saw me. "Margaret, thank God you're here. It's been chaos. Trent's been telling everyone you went rogue, that you made a side deal. Where is he now?" "Conference room B with his father and the lawyers." I walked straight to Robert's office. He was on the phone, pacing behind his desk, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past 72 hours. When he saw me, he ended his call immediately. "Margaret, sit down. We need to talk." Over the next 20 minutes, Robert laid out what had happened while I was exchanging vows at Lake Tahoe. Trent had accessed my secure project files using his administrative privileges. He drafted a preliminary contract amendment that would have converted 30% of the affordable housing units into luxury condos. He'd pitched this new vision to Winslow Development, a competing firm, suggesting they could partner with Glenhurst on a more upscale version of the project. And he'd forged my signature on the preliminary paperwork. But here's what he hadn't counted on. Glenhurst's legal department was meticulous. Every contract, even preliminary ones, got reviewed by at least 2 attorneys before any money changed hands. On Saturday afternoon, while I was saying, "I do," the legal team had flagged the Winslow contract as inconsistent with our city council agreements. They'd called Robert immediately, assuming it was either a mistake or something I'd authorized without proper channels. Robert, not knowing about my firing, had tried calling me to clarify. When he couldn't reach me, he'd started calling everyone else, trying to figure out what was happening. "I thought you'd gone behind my back," he said quietly. "I thought maybe Trent had convinced you to side with him on this luxury condo idea." "Robert," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need you to understand something. I would never compromise the Sacramento project. never. That project represents everything I believe about responsible development. He studied my face for a long moment. I know that now, but I need you to prove it. An hour later, I was sitting at the head of a conference table, facing the entire Glenhurst Development Board of Directors. Robert was at one end, his lawyers flanking him. Trent was at the other end, looking pale but defiant. I opened my briefcase and methodically laid out every piece of evidence I'd compiled. Email chains showing my consistent opposition to luxury development on the Sacramento site. Time-stamped records of my meetings with community groups. Voice memos from city council sessions where I'd specifically argued against gentrification. But the smoking gun was a recording that Gina had made on her phone. "Play it," I said. The audio was scratchy, but clear enough. Trent's voice, recorded the Friday before my wedding while he was bragging to some junior associates about his plan. "Margaret thinks she's so smart, but she doesn't understand business. This Sacramento thing could be a gold mine if we just had the guts to aim up market. After this weekend, maybe Daddy will finally see who really understands the Glenhurst vision." One of the associates asked, "What happens to Margaret?" Trent's laugh was cold. "Let's just say she's about to learn what happens when you get too big for your britches." When the recording ended, the conference room was silent. I looked at each board member, then at Robert, then finally at Trent. "I've worked for this company for 6 years," I said. "I've sacrificed weekends, holidays, and vacations. I postponed my wedding preparation meeting to handle a zoning appeal. I've never asked for credit I didn't earn or power I hadn't proven I could handle responsibly." I stood up and placed one final folder on the table. "This contains my recommendations for protecting the Sacramento project. We need to immediately notify the City Council that this luxury condo proposal was completely unauthorized. The community groups need reassurance that we're still committed to our original affordable housing plan." I looked directly at Trent. "What can't be protected is trust once it's been broken, and without trust, this company can't function." Robert stared at the folder for a long moment. Then he looked at his son, who was slumped in his chair, all his earlier bravado gone. Robert didn't say anything. He just nodded at the 2 security guards who'd been standing quietly by the door. They escorted Trent out of the building. He didn't say a word. 2 weeks later, Robert called me to his office. I thought it would be a debriefing, maybe even a quiet exit conversation with a decent severance package. The Sacramento project was back on track, but I figured my time at Glenhurst was probably over. Too much drama, too much family politics. Instead, Robert handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a revised organizational chart and a new employment contract. Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. I stared at the papers, not quite processing what I was seeing. "Robert, I don't understand." He leaned back in his chair. "Margaret, in 40 years of business, I've learned that there are 2 kinds of people. Those who build things and those who take credit for what others build. I spent too many years confusing the 2. He gestured toward the window, where we could see the San Francisco skyline. "Trent never built anything. He inherited a name and assumed that was enough. But you built relationships, you built trust, you built projects that actually help people. You never once asked for more than you earned. And you proved that you'd protect this company's values even when it cost you personally." I thought about the scared, ambitious 23-year-old who'd started in this building 6 years earlier. I thought about all the late nights, all the community meetings, all the times I'd chosen work over personal time because I believed in what we were building. "I need time to think about it," I said. "Take all the time you need." That evening, Connor and I walked through Golden Gate Park, talking through the offer. It was one of those perfect San Francisco nights, clear sky, gentle breeze off the ocean, the city lights starting to twinkle in the distance. "What does your gut tell you?" he asked. "That I've earned this, that I can do the job better than Trent ever could." "Then what's holding you back?" I thought about that for a long time. What was holding me back? Fear, maybe, imposter syndrome. The little voice that said women like me, middle-class girls from New Jersey, who'd worked their way up without connections or trust funds, didn't become chief operating officers of major development companies. But then I thought about every woman who'd been told to let it go or don't rock the boat. Every person who'd ever been underestimated because they weren't born into privilege. I thought about the families in Sacramento who were counting on affordable housing, about all the future projects I could influence, about the kind of company Glenhurst could become with someone in leadership who actually cared about responsible development. "You know what?" I said to Connor. "Trent was right about one thing. I was getting too big for my britches." I smiled. "Good thing I can afford bigger britches now." So yeah, the boss's son fired me on my wedding day via text message, said it was his gift to me. 4 hours later, his father called me, desperately trying to clean up the mess Trent had made. And now, 6 months later, I'm sitting in what used to be Trent's corner office, with my name on the door and the Golden Gate Bridge in my window. The Sacramento project broke ground last month. The first families will move in by few months. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, exactly the people we designed it for. Trent. Last I heard, he was finding himself in Bali, living off his trust fund and probably learning very little about himself or anything else. Robert and I rebuilt the company culture from the ground up. We instituted transparent promotion processes. We created mentorship programs for young employees. We made it clear that results matter more than relationships and merit matters more than birthright. Connor and I finally took our honeymoon, a week in Greece where I barely checked my work email and actually learned to make moussaka from scratch. When people ask me about work-life balance, I tell them about a man who was willing to postpone his wedding because he knew my dreams mattered as much as his. But here's what I really want you to remember from this story. Success isn't about revenge. It's not about proving people wrong or getting back at those who have wronged you. Success is about building something that lasts, something that matters, something that makes the world a little bit better than it was before you showed up. Trent thought he could tear down what I'd built. Instead, he just cleared the way for me to build something bigger. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best gift you never saw coming, even if it doesn't feel like a gift at the time. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to share this video and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more incredible revenge stories coming your way. But here's what I want to know. If you were in Margaret's shoes, would you have taken the promotion or walked away to start fresh somewhere else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you would have done.